لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما مزيدا وبعد. The lecture that we have before us this afternoon is regarding a topic of great importance in the Islamic religion. And it is the third topic that has been discussed in this camp. The topic, as you all know, is regarding Allah's awliya and Satan's awliya. And as the topic is very large, there's no way to really cover it in one lecture. Because the nature of the topic is that it entails a lot of concepts and details which are very important to be discussed in and of himself. I mean, if we made just the camp itself on just awliya Allah and awliya al-shaytan, Allah's awliya and the devil's awliya, that would be enough to have a whole camp about. So how could we just have one lecture about one topic? However, by Allah's grace and mercy, especially since this topic is in the English language, there does exist a book which has been translated into English, which I brought with me. The book is written by Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, and even though the translator's name was not mentioned on the book, it was translated by a brother on the West Coast, Brother Salam Morgan, and it's entitled The Criterion Between the Allies of the Merciful and the Allies of the Devil, and it was printed in the United Kingdom. This book is a good introduction to the subject, and it's available in English, so inshallah ta'ala, what I'd like to do in this lecture is just point out some of the points in this book and add some other issues of importance. And it always makes it easier for a person speaking, especially in English, when there is some source material available in the English language for the brothers to refer to. Okay, let us first, before getting into the lecture in earnest, let us take some regulations or some principles that we must understand. These are very important principles in the religion. They are principles that are not only rooted in knowledge, but also have action that they entail. And they are important that we understand these principles in order for us to really understand the topic which is before us. The first principle is the incumbency of loving Allah and following what Allah wants. And as Ibn al-Qayyim mentions in one of his books, this is a great principle of faith in the religion. That we love Allah and that we love that which Allah wants of us as His creatures. Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has referred to this in a number of passages in His book. And likewise in the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you will find a number of hadith which refer to this concept. For example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showing the difference between those who love Him out of tawheed, loving Him alone, and those who love others with Him. Allah says, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَن يَتَّخِذُ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ أَنْدَادًا يُحِبُّونَهُمْ كَحُبِّ اللَّهِ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَشَدُّ حُبًّا لِلَّهِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Baqarah that of humanity there are those who take rivals, and dads meaning rivals or equals, besides Allah, and they love them as they love Allah. However, those who believe love Allah greater. Their love to Allah is greater. This is a great verse in the Quran because it discusses one of the forms of shirk, one of the forms of worshipping other than Allah, and that is shirk in al-mahabba, shirk in loving other than Allah. And when I entered into this camp, as most of these camps usually are owned by Christians, one of the things which caught my eye was going to a great portrait of Jesus, alayhi salam. Even though they don't know how Isa alayhi salam looks like, but the point is they put it there out of their love to Isa. That love, since it's a love of shirk, that has led them to even worship Isa. That is why tomorrow, since it's Sunday, you'll find the Christians going to their churches and expressing that love by worshipping Isa alayhi salam. So in this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala discusses that, saying that there are those of humanity who have taken partners with Allah. They love them as they love Allah. And this is the shirk in love, because love is only to be for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the love of worship. But those who believe are stronger in love to Allah. Stronger in love to Allah in the sense that because they purely love Allah, they have tawheed in love, in their love, and so therefore all their love is to Allah, so their love of Allah is stronger than the mushrik's love of Allah, because his love is divided between Allah and those who He worships. And likewise, it is stronger love to Allah than the love of they have towards their idols. And also in this verse, we find, also another verse, we find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قل إن كان آباؤكم وأبناؤكم وإخوانكم وأزواجكم وعشيرتكم وأموال اقترفتموها وتجارة تخشون كسادها ومساكن ترضونها أحب إليكم من الله ورسوله وجهاد في سبيله فتربصوا حتى يأتي الله بأمره. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah At-Tawbah, say to them, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that if your love of your parents and your children and your brothers and your wives and your families and the money which you have gained and that commerce which you fear might slacken and the homes in which you take delight in are more beloved to you than Allah and His Messenger and waging jihad in the path of Allah, then wait until Allah's command comes, meaning wait until Allah's punishment comes. So in this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warns us taking any of these 8 categories as an object of love above love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that which He wants, from loving the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and loving jihad in His path in specific. Those 8 categories again being one's fathers, meaning one's parents, or one's children, or one's brothers, and entering into that of course will be sisters, and one's wives, and one's family, and the money which one has gained, and the commerce or the occupation one lives in, and likewise the homes that one takes delight in. So the point of this first rule is that we are required to love Allah and love that which Allah loves. Okay, what is the second principle? The second principle is that a person is with whom he loves. As the Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith reported by Al-Bukhari and Muslim, Al-mar'u ma'a man ahab, that a person is with he who he loves. This is the second rule, and this is obvious, and we should be clear that if a person loves Allah, he is with those people who love Allah. He will try to come closer to them, he will try to live with them, he will try to do that which makes them closer to them. Like if a person loves Allah, he will try to follow those who love Allah, like Allah's prophets, and in specific the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And likewise, if a person loves the devils, or loves evil people, he will try to be with them. That's why you find a person who loves Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he tries to resemble the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, not only in his outer appearance, but he also tries to resemble the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his character, in his way of belief, in his way of worship. And likewise, you find a person who loves the evil people, he will try to resemble them not only in their dress and in the way of appearance, but also he will try to resemble them in what he likes and what he dislikes and so forth. The third principle is that truth and falsehood are opposites, never meeting. Truth and falsehood are opposite, never meeting. They're antithetical to one another. Truth can never join with falsehood, but rather they're always on opposite ends. There's no middle ground between truth and falsehood. Either it's truth or falsehood, or either it's falsehood or truth. There is nothing which is middle ground between this. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran in Surah Yunus, فَمَاذَا بَعْدَ الْحَقِّ إِلَّا الضَّلَالِ. What is after truth except for dalal, or error, falsehood? In other words, there is nothing besides truth except for falsehood, even though, irrespective of how many forms and shapes it might have. The fourth principle is that loving Allah necessitates hating Satan. In other words, one cannot love Allah and cannot love that which Allah wants unless he hates Satan and hates that what Satan wants. And this is very important because some people feel that they can take a neutral position towards evil. In other words, some people feel in life that they love good, but they don't have to take a stance against evil. Just let that be, I mean, everybody can have his own way in life, or that they don't feel that it's necessary to struggle against evil, but rather that it's sufficient just not to delve into evil oneself, irrespective of that type of evil. These are types of ideas that many human beings have in one way or another. But the point is that loving Allah and loving that which Allah loves necessitates hating Satan and hating that what Satan wants. The fifth principle is that because of this, because that we are required to love Allah and love what Allah wants, and because a person is with he who he loves, and because truth and falsehood are opposite, never meeting, and that loving Allah necessitates hating Satan and hating what Satan wants, we find that humanity is two groups. There are those who are the Awliya of Ar-Rahman, those who love Allah and who are close to Allah. This is what the word Awliya is a plural of the word wali, which I'm sure was explained maybe in the previous lectures to mine. Love. And likewise there are those who love Satan and are close to Satan. They're the Awliya of Satan. Again, awliya being the plural of the Arabic word wali. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned this over and over in the Quran. You'll find many passages where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes these two groups of people in one sense or the other. For instance, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Baqarah, Allahu waliyyu alladhina amanu yukhrijuhum min al-dhulumati ila an-nur. Allah is the wali, the guardian, the protector of those who believe. He takes them from the different types of darkness, because here darkness in Arabic is plural, even though there's not a word in English, darkness cannot be made plural in English, but forms of darkness we can say, to the light. And likewise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says, وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا أَوْلِيَاءُهُمُ الطَّاغُوتُ يُخْرِجُونَهُم مِّنَ النُّورِ إِلَى الظُّلُمَاتِ. That those who disbelieve, those who are unbelievers, those who are kuffar, their awliya, their guardians, their protectors, their leaders are a taghut. A taghut is a word which means anything which is worshipped outside of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and is pleased of that worship. And these taghut take them from light into darkness. And again, the word darkness in Arabic is in plural. أُولَٰئِكَ أَصْحَابُ النَّارِ هُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes these second group of people by saying that they are the inhabitants of the hellfire, meaning they will be in the hellfire, and that they will be there for all eternity. This is an example where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions two groups of humanity. Allah divided human beings into two groups. Those who have Allah as a protector, as a wali, and what happens is that Allah takes them from darkness, the different forms of darkness, into light. And those who have a taghut, and taghut in Arabic can be plural or singular, and in this case it's plural, who take them from the many forms, from the likeness, the one likeness, to the many forms of darkness. And these people will be in the hellfire for all eternity. Allah also describing these two groups of people says in another verse in Surah An-Nisa, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا يُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا يُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ الطَّاغُوتِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, those who believe, they fight in the path of Allah. And those who disbelieve, they fight in the path of a taghut. Again, taghut means whatever is worshipped besides Allah and is pleased with that worship. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَقَاتِلُوا أَوْلِيَاءَ الشَّيْطَانِ. So fight the awliya of Satan. Fight the awliya of Satan. إِنَّ كَيْدَ الشَّيْطَانِ كَانَ ضَعِيفًا. That the plot or the strategy of Satan is weak. So the point is that even though Satan is in charge of them, in reality his arguments and his plot and his deception is weak. And the believer can see into this, and truth will always prevail over falsehood in the end. The point is, again in this verse, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala divided humanity into two groups. Those who believe, who fight in the path of Allah, and those who disbelieve, who fight in the path of taghut. That's just an information. And there's a command that the believer should fight the awliya of Satan, those who have taken Satan as their guard and their protector, and who are close and love Satan. Also, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks the believers, or asks humanity in general, He says, أَفَتَتَّخِذُونَهُ وَذُرِّيَّتُهُ أَوْلِيَاءَ مِنْ دُونِي وَهُمْ لَكُمْ عَدُوٌّ بِئْسَ لِلظَّالِمِينَ بَدَلًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Kahf, will you take him, meaning Satan, and his descendants, meaning the other jinn, the other devils, because Iblis is like Adam for the jinns. Just like Adam is the father of all of us human beings, in the same way it is said that Iblis is the father of all the jinns. And so therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this verse has said that will you take him, meaning Iblis, Satan, who refused to bow down to Adam, and his descendants as your awliya, instead of me, meaning instead of Allah Azza wa Jal. And at the same time, they are your enemies. And this is those who have caused injustice to their soul have made an evil exchange. Meaning those who have decided to adopt Satan and his descendants as their awliya, their protectors, and the ones who they love, have made an evil exchange to take your enemy as one to protect you, as one who you trust into, as one who you follow, and so forth. And everybody can understand this example that Allah is giving in the Quran. For instance, if you know that there is somebody out there, let's say on your neighborhood block, who is looking to, the first opportunity you get to come and steal from you, or to hit you, or to kill you even. Would it make any sense that you would turn to him to ask for his protecting, or his defense, or that you would come close to him, or that you would try to look towards his advice or something like that? Of course not. We understand this in our human lives. So therefore these devils, and Satan himself, Iblis, are stronger in their animosity. So how could we then take them as our awliya instead of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, بِئْسَ لِلظَّالِمِينَ بَدَلًا. He concludes the verse by saying, what an evil exchange those who have caused injustice to their souls have done. In other words, by adopting Satan and his descendants as their awliya, instead of taking Allah as their wali. So if we understand this issue, this comes to the sixth principle, that since in humanity there are those who Allah and the Prophet ﷺ have told us that there are those who are the awliya of Allah, those who love Allah and are close to Allah, and at the same time there are those who are the awliya of Satan, those who love Satan and are close to Satan, it becomes our responsibility now, since we are Muslims and we submit to the book and the sunnah, and we follow Allah's book and we follow the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, to distinguish between the two. Because Allah has informed us of this. And Allah has indeed, in many verses, as probably you heard in the first lecture, has warned us, for instance, taking the unbelievers as our awliya. So it becomes required then for every single Muslim to distinguish between those of humanity who are the awliya of Allah and those of humanity who are the awliya of shaitan or Satan. And this is where the problem occurs, because many human beings have, for one reason or the other, have not been able to distinguish between the two because of misunderstanding. And so therefore you find many human beings thinking that Allah's awliya are Allah's enemies. And at the same time they think that Allah's enemies, and people who are indeed the awliya of shaitan, those who Satan loves and who are close to Satan, whether they realize that or them not, they think that they are the awliya of Allah. This is the confusion that many human beings have. Alright? And so what we'd like to do in this lecture is to discuss, in some detail perhaps, what are the characteristics of Awliya Ar-Rahman, and what are the characteristics of Awliya Shaitan, and also then at the same time, what are some of the misconceptions that Muslims in particular have regarding this issue, because it's important to understand that we may protect ourselves from this confusion in the matter. Okay, who are the awliya of Allah? I mean, who are those people who are close to Allah? The word wilaya comes from the Arabic word meaning that something is close to something. So the awliya of Allah meaning those who are close to Allah, in the sense that Allah loves them and they love Allah. So who are these people? Who are the awliya of Allah? I mean, are they a specific set of individuals? Can we recognize them? Do they have a specific way of wearing clothes, for instance? Do they have a specific way of eating? Do they have specific habits or customs? Who are the awliya of Allah? How would we know? Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us this in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in one verse makes it very clear. He says, أَلَا إِنَّ أَوْلِيَاءَ اللَّهِ لَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَهُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَكَانُوا يَتَّقُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Yunus, the 10th surah of the Quran, that indeed Allah's awliya, those who are close to Allah and who love Allah and Allah loves them, they will have no fear upon them, nor will they be saddened. Meaning, when they die, they will not fear the coming that they are facing, what they are heading to, because they were close to Allah. So they're not any fear of them. And likewise, they will not be saddened by what they left behind on the earth. And this refers to what the angels do when they come to the dying believer. In the sense they give them good tidings when the soul is taken out of the body of the believer, saying that there is nothing to fear. And at the same time, there's nothing to be saddened by what you're leaving behind, because you're going to something which is better. And then Allah describes them. He says, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَكَانُوا يَتَّقُونَ. That they are those who have iman, and at the same time, they had taqwa. They died believing, and they had taqwa. In other words, they lived, and taqwa, as we've discussed in other lectures, and also I'm sure everybody understands, a taqwa means to place in front of you, and that what Allah hates, a barrier, a waqaya, some sort of guard. Irrespective of what that guard is, I mean, in the sense that it could be in terms of beliefs, in the sense that you protect yourself from having wrong beliefs by having good beliefs. It could be from Allah's anger by doing that which He has commanded, or leaving that which He has forbidden. But the point is that you have some sort of barrier between yourself and what Allah hates, what Allah brings Allah's wrath and Allah's punishment. So they had taqwa in this world. These are those who are Allah's awliya. So Allah's awliya, as defined by Allah Himself, that those who are close to Him are those who have iman and who have taqwa. And so therefore we know that therefore the ones who are in top of the awliya, I mean the ones who are the most deserving of this quality, are who? The prophets. Because of all of humanity, the prophets are closer to Allah than anyone else. And that they are the ones who have the strongest amount of faith. And likewise, they have the strongest amount of piety to Allah and fearfulness of Him, or taqwa, as regards the other human beings. And even within the prophets, as the Prophet ﷺ informed us in a hadith reported by Imam Ahmed, that the prophets were some 313,000. No, excuse me, they were 124,000. Even of these 124,000 prophets, there are degrees. I mean, the prophets of Allah, you might imagine how many human beings have existed since the time of Adam who will exist until the Day of Judgment. We know right now on earth there's about, they say, 5 or 6 billion people. So how about since the time of Adam? And Allah knows how long the earth will remain until the Day of Judgment. So of all these billions and billions of souls, of human beings, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose 124,000 men as prophets. Very small number. Of those 124,000, they're degrees. As Allah tells us in the Quran, the Prophet ﷺ informed us that 313 of them were messengers. The word Arabic prophet being Nabi, and the word messenger being Rasul. And likewise, we know that of these 313 messengers, Rasul, that Allah has mentioned 5 of them together in 2 passages in the Quran, in Surah Ahzab and Surah Shura, and they are referred to as Uli al-Azm min al-Rusul. Those messengers who have firm resolution or firm resolve. These 5 being, of course, the messenger Noah, who was the first messenger sent to mankind, Abraham alayhi salam, Musa alayhi salam, Moses, Isa alayhi salam, Jesus, and finally the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And of these 5, 2 of them are Allah's Khalil, which means Khalil, al-Khilla, is a degree of love which is the highest degree of love. Because love is of degrees. And the highest degree of love is al-Khilla. And if a person is Khilla, he's your Khalil, if you have that type of love for a person. And therefore, of these two, of humanity, only 2 people have had that love from Allah toward them. Ibrahim alayhi salam and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And of the 2, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the best of humanity. So even of this 124,000 who are the best of the awliya, those close to Allah, there are even degrees within that. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam being the most best. And remember we said what was the definition of being a wali? Is that he who has faith and has taqwa. And if we find in Sahih Bukhari hadith where the Prophet ﷺ says, I know Allah the best, this is the iman, and I am the most fearful of him among any of you. So here the Prophet ﷺ is describing himself with that character. Likewise, we know that in general, if you look in the Quran, that Allah's awliya are basically 2 groups. We find that there are those who are very close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there are those who are not as close. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describing humanity in general, all of humanity, irrespective of which prophet they followed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, or if they do not follow any prophet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Waqi'ah, وَكُنْتُمْ أَزْوَاجًا ثَلَاثًا, and you will be on the Day of Judgment 3 parties. فَأَصْحَابُ الْمَيْمَنَةِ مَا أَصْحَابُ الْمَيْمَنَةِ, those on the right side, who are those on the right side? وَأَصْحَابُ الْمَشْأَمَةِ مَا أَصْحَابُ الْمَشْأَمَةِ, and those on the left side who are on the left side. وَالسَّابِقُونَ السَّابِقُونَ, and those who are standing in front, who have preceded them all. أُولَٰئِكَ الْمُقَرَّبُونَ, those are those who are closest to Allah. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala divided humanity into 3 groups on the Day of Judgment. 3 general groups. Those on the right hand side, those on the left hand side, and then those who are closest to Him. And so therefore Allah's awliya are 2 general categories. Al-Muqarribun, those who are the closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also those who are not as close. And we find the same meaning in a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In a Qudsi hadith, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, whoever shows enmity to one of my walis, one of those who are close to me, I will come forward with him in warfare. من عاد لي وليا فقد بارزني بالمحاربة. Whoever shows enmity to one of my awliya, to one of those who I love, he has declared or has come forward in fighting me. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes his awliya as 2 groups. He says, وَمَا تَقَرَّبْ إِلَيَّ عَبْدِي بِمِثْلِ إِدَاءَ مَا افْتَرَضْتُهُ عَلَيْهِ, that none of my servants draw close to me like with that which I have obligated upon them. In other words, the best thing that Allah loves to draw close to Him is the obligated matters. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in this Qudsi hadith that my servant still comes close to me. وَلَا يَزَالْ عَبْدِي يَتَقَرَّبْ إِلَيَّ بِالنَّوَافِلِ, that my servant still comes closer to me with doing those matters which I have recommended for him to do until I love him. Until I love him. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that his awliya, to who if one shows enmity to, he has really shown enmity to Allah, are 2 groups. Those who have come close to him with what he has obligated, and that is the most beloved thing to him. And then those who still draw closer to Allah, with what? With the extra, the voluntary deeds. Drawing closer to Allah so much until Allah loves them. Meaning a special type of love. Because originally the Prophet hadith says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Qudsi hadith says that whoever fights one of his awliya, so Allah loves him in the first point. But this is a special type of love, in the sense, as the hadith continues to explain. So if I love him, I am his hearing by which he hears by. In other words, I will guide his hearing that he only hears that which is lawful, and I am his sight by which he sees by, and I am his hand by which he strikes by, and I am his foot by which he walks by. Okay, so therefore, we understand that Allah's awliya, from this verse in the Quran, right, and from this hadith, and there are many other verses in the Quran, are two groups. Those who have drawn closer to Allah by doing also besides the obligatory, by doing likewise the recommended actions, and also by not only leaving the forbidden, but leaving that which is considered to be disliked in the Sharia, even though it might not be forbidden, that which is known as makruh. And likewise also by leaving much of those matters which have neither reward or punishment, that which is mubah, by foregoing that also as much as possible. And then there are those who are less than them, but nonetheless from Allah's awliya. And in the sense that they have only done that which Allah has required, and at the same time they have left what Allah has forbidden, but they have not engaged themselves in doing that which Allah has recommended, what Allah has encouraged, even though He didn't require it. And likewise leaving that which Allah dislikes, even though He has not forbidden it, in the sense that it entails sinfulness. And so therefore the awliya are two groups. And likewise we find in a verse which is discussing this ummah in particular, the first verses which I mentioned to you, we're discussing humanity in general on the Day of Judgment. That there were those on the right hand side, those on the left hand side, and those who proceeded forward and were closer to Allah. So that was in humanity in general. This is about this ummah in specific. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Fatir, ثُمَّ أَوْرَثْنَا الْكِتَابَ الَّذِينَ اصْطَفَيْنَا مِنْ عِبَادِنَا, that we then inherited this revelation to those who we have chosen amongst our servants. So this ummah is the one who has inherited revelation, because revelation left the children of Israel to this ummah. We're being the final ummah, so we're the ones who have inherited this revelation. To those whom Allah has chosen. So Allah has chosen, every single member of this ummah is chosen by Allah to some degree. And then Allah describes them. فَمِنْهُمْ ظَالِمٌ لِنَفْسِهِ وَمِنْهُمْ مُقْتَصَدٌ وَمِنْهُمْ سَابِقٌ بِالْخَيْرَاتِ بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. That among those who Allah has chosen, among those who have inherited the revelation, are those who have caused injustice to their souls. That's one group of people. And those who have taken a middle path. And those who have proceeded in good deeds by Allah's permission. So here we have three groups in this ummah. Those who have caused injustice to their souls. And this means that those who have done some good deeds and some evil deeds. They do that which is required, but sometimes they do that which is forbidden. They do not leave that. Or sometimes they are negligent in doing that which is required of them. So they mix one good deed with one evil deed. But they still are from those Allah has chosen, and they're still from those who have inherited the revelation, the scripture. And they are still from Allah's awliya, as we will discuss. And then there are those who have taken the middle path, al-muqtasid. He has taken a middle path in the sense he's only done what is required and has left that which is forbidden, not engaging himself in extra deeds or leaving things which are disliked by Allah. وَمِنْهُمْ سَابِقٌ بِالْخَيْرَاتِ بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. And there are those who have proceeded by doing good deeds, much good, meaning the extra that Allah has encouraged outside of that which Allah has required by Allah's permission. So in this verse, we understand and therefore that Allah's awliya are three groups when it comes to this ummah. Those who mix good deeds with bad deeds, those who are taking a middle course and doing that which is required and leaving that which is forbidden, and likewise those who have done much good by also doing that which Allah has encouraged and leaving that which Allah has disliked, and also foregoing much which is neutral or mubah. In other words, it's permitted but it has neither reward nor punishment to it. And so therefore this should clear up one misconception right now after this discussion. The idea that Allah's awliya are sinless, or that Allah's awliya are errorless. There's a concept that many Muslims have, that in order for a person to be amongst Allah's awliya, in order for a person to be among those who Allah loves and is close to Allah, he must be sinless. And also that he must be errorless. This is incorrect. We know that from these verses of the Quran that I was mentioning. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that among those people who He has chosen, فَمِنْهُمْ ظَالِمٌ لِنَفْسِهِ, that amongst them are those who have caused injustice to their souls. And so therefore one can be amongst awliya of Allah, those who are close to Allah, and those who Allah loves, even if he commits a sin. And even if he's ignorant of some issues of the Sharia. And even if he is mistaken in some matters, and he commits errors, whether they are errors in matters of knowledge, or errors in matters of action and deed. This does not deny a person from being from amongst those close to Allah Azza wa Jal. And so therefore this misconception that Allah's awliya are sinless and also impeccable in the sense they make neither mistake or error is an incorrect notion which the Quran shows opposite to. Likewise, if Allah's awliya are, as we've seen, Allah's awliya are the believers and those who have taqwa, well, we know from the principles of our religion that iman increases and decreases, and that people in their piety, their taqwa, are of different degrees. And so therefore Allah's awliya are of different degrees. Just like the prophets are of different degrees in their closeness to Allah and in their ranks. Likewise, the rest of the believers, the followers of the prophets, are of different degrees. And so therefore we find that the best of Allah's awliya are, outside of the prophets, are people like Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu, who is mentioned in some hadith, even though the hadith has some weakness in its chain of narrators, but the meaning behind the hadith is nonetheless accurate, that the sun has not risen nor set upon someone better after the prophets of Allah than Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. So Abu Bakr as-Siddiq is not like one of us, for instance. Even though we both follow the same prophet, and we both believe in the same prophet. And we share in our being followers and members of the ummah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And likewise, we know in a correct hadith, which is reported by Imam al-Bukhari, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam explained that the best of humanity was his generation. خَيْرُ النَّاسِ قَرْنِي. The best of humanity was his generation. Then those who came after them, then those who came after them. So even amongst the followers of the prophets, there are also degrees. These degrees are based upon their faith and their taqwa. And as a result of this difference in their faith and their taqwa, their closeness to Allah is different degrees. So yes, Allah's awliya are of different degrees. There are those who are, because remember, we said the word awliya, which is the noun for the word wilaya in this case, means those who are close to Allah and who Allah loves. So Allah loves them in different degrees. So He loves a sinful believer not as much as He loves the pious believer. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves the one who has stronger faith more than He loves one who has weaker faith. And that they are degrees between that. Now, it's important to understand, though, that the root of faith is faith in Allah's messengers. And specifically for this ummah, faith in the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so therefore, we also understand by this definition of Awliya of Ar-Rahman that there are those who have faith and who have taqwa. This means that whoever does not believe in the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is not from the Awliya of Ar-Rahman. In other words, if a person is a Jew or a Christian, he is not from the awliya of Allah. And so therefore he is from the awliya of shaitan. So, sometimes you hear people say, for instance, especially, the American brothers would understand this very easily. Sometimes they say, well, my grandmother, she lived like a very saintly life. She's always going to church and never harmed a soul and so forth, right? Now, this is not true. She might have been a very nice person in her character, okay? But she was not from the awliya of Allah. And indeed, she's from the awliya of shaitan, even though she might have not harmed a fly, in her whole life, and was always nice and so forth. Why? Because she does not have faith. Because in order to be from the awliya of Allah, to be those who are close to Allah, and those who Allah loves, you have to have iman and taqwa. And so therefore, the Christian grandmother, she wouldn't have that because she doesn't believe in the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And even if she acknowledged that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a messenger of Allah, and still believed that Jesus was the son of Allah, or that Jesus had some sort of divinity, would not be from the awliya of Allah. So these people are from the awliya of shaitan. Likewise, if a person is a hypocrite, a munafiq, in the sense that even though he might say in his tongue that he believes in Allah and His messenger, and even though he might pray, he might wage jihad, he might give charity, as the munafiqun do, but inwardly, in his heart, he disbelieves in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This person is not from the awliya of Allah. Why? Because he doesn't have iman in his heart. So therefore, the iman here is the iman in the messengers, and in specific, the iman in the Prophet ﷺ. Likewise, therefore, Hindus and Buddhists. So there are some Hindus and Buddhists, you will find, living, for instance, like in the jungle, and so forth, or living out on the top of a mountain. And people, you might, in the popular culture, say, oh, he's a wise man, he's living out there on the mountain by himself, and you go and you ask him any question, and he'll be able to answer for you, and so forth, and seek advice from him. These are not from the Awliya of Allah. They're from the Awliya of Shaitan. Why? Because they do not believe in the prophets in the first place, they don't believe in revelation, and also, moreover, they don't believe in the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ specifically. Okay, so now we've, inshallah ta'ala, cleared this concept. So then therefore, the Awliya of Shaitan, in general, are whoever does not have Iman and does not have Taqwa. Because Taqwa comes from Iman. And so therefore, all the unbelievers are from the Awliya of Shaitan. And all the hypocrites are from the Awliya of Shaitan. If a person does not believe in the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, does not believe in the message of Islam, he's from the Awliya of Shaitan. He's from the Awliya, he's from those close to the devil, those who the devil loves, and whether he recognizes that about himself or not. And likewise, people in that are degrees. People in that are degrees. So just like, because people in disbelief and people in hypocrisy are degrees. And so therefore the Awliya of Shaitan are degrees. There are those who are very close to Satan due to their great kufr or their great hypocrisy. And there are those who are less in closeness to Satan due to they having kufr but less kufr and less hypocrisy. Just like the believers, there are those who are strong, very close to Allah among the Awliya of Allah, and there are those who are less due to their sinfulness and their weakness of Iman. And so therefore, the Awliya of Shaitan are also degrees. And based upon this, as of course this conference or this gathering being upon al-Wala wal-Bara, our love and our support for the Awliya of Allah are degrees due to their degrees toward Allah Azza wa Jal. Our love and our support of the Prophet ﷺ is not like our love and support of an average Muslim, because he's closer to Allah Azza wa Jal. And of course, Allah has obligated, besides the fact that Allah has obligated for us to support him and to follow him and to believe in him and to love him and so forth. But just from the position of being closest to Allah, taking it from this perspective. And likewise, our love and our support of the Prophet's companions, like Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman and Ali and Aisha, is not like our love and our support for the rest of the Muslims. Even though there's some similarity in that, because they are stronger in their love of Allah and their faith and their taqwa and their knowledge and their jihad and so forth. And so therefore they're closer to Allah Azza wa Jal. And likewise, we give them therefore in our wala to each believer according to his degree of his love of Allah, his closeness to Allah, his obedience to Allah and so forth. We distinguish in this degree. And likewise with the unbelievers, we are also dealing with them in degrees. Those who are severe, our animosity and our hatred towards Satan should be the most than any of the unbelievers. And likewise, those who come under Satan, like those who call to falsehood and set millions astray, like the Pope, should be stronger than the average Christian, our hatred and our animosity toward him. And the unbeliever who raises his sword or aims his gun at a Muslim to kill him and fight us because of our faith and throw us out, our animosity and our hatred towards them should be stronger than the Christian or the Jew or the unbeliever who is peaceful towards us and who has no harm towards us. We make this distinction. Just like we make a distinction between the believers, and we treat them in degrees. We treat the scholars different than we treat the commoner. We treat those of the Sahaba different than we treat the rest of the Ummah. We treat the prophets different than we treat the followers of the Prophet. Likewise with the unbelievers. We treat each one of them different depending upon his closest to Satan. Our animosity and our hatred of him is stronger than those who are further from Satan, even though in general they are all from the Awliya of Shaitan. They're all from that grouping. And likewise, it's important to understand that here's an issue which is based upon this, going back to the Awliya of Allah, which people misunderstand. That Allah's Awliya do not necessarily have to be the scholars. Even though knowledge is the key to piety, and even though knowledge is the key to paradise, this is without doubt. But the point is that in terms of one's closeness to Allah, knowledge in itself is not a determining factor in itself, because a person is responsible for that much which he knows. So it is conceivable that a person would only have a general faith in the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. So a person doesn't speak Arabic, All he knows of Islam is some few hadith and so forth, few verses of the Quran. But he acts upon them. He acts upon them fully, with a strong faith. This person might be closer to Allah than a person who knows much volumes of knowledge, but doesn't act upon them. Even though knowledge in itself would help a person, that if that person acted upon knowledge, he would be of a higher degree than that person who had little knowledge and only acted upon his little knowledge, because he's able to draw closer to Allah by the more he knows. But the point is that knowledge in itself is not a indicator that one is from Allah's awliya, just mere knowledge in itself. But knowledge and acting upon that knowledge is what makes a person even closer to Allah than the person who has no knowledge and acts upon what little knowledge he has. Based upon this, there's another misconception to the other degree, where people think that a person who is ignorant is therefore from Allah's awliya. A person who is ignorant, let's say by choice. This is a very popular concept amongst Muslims. You know, that if for a person to be from Allah's awliya, he's ignorant and he doesn't know anything of the Sharia. And his ignorance is to a degree where he is blameworthy, in the sense that he neither seeks to want to know the Sharia, nor does he care to learn. That this person by himself might become from Allah's awliya. This is not true. Because the point here, what we mean by a person not having knowledge, is a sense that he only has as much knowledge as has been made available to him. In the sense he only knows that which has been reached him, and that because of his circumstance, his knowledge, his great knowledge has not reached him, and so therefore he is not held blameworthy for not seeking knowledge. Or he doesn't have the mental capacity to learn. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given people degrees in the ability to learn, just like he's given them degrees in strength, and given them degrees in wealth, and giving them degrees in health and so forth. These are Allah's blessings which He scatters amongst His creation in different degrees to see who will be thankful and who will be ungrateful. And so therefore a person might not have the ability to learn, and he would not be held and therefore blameworthy for not learning. So the point is that therefore we've learned now, one of the issues we've learned, that Allah's awliya do not necessarily have to be those who are the scholars. Even though the scholars are amongst the awliya, those scholars who act upon their knowledge, and amongst the greatest of the awliya. And likewise, at the same time, the idea, the other concept, which is the other extreme, that only the ignorant are Allah's awliya, this is also a misconception. Also, we learn from this that those people who neither have good or bad deeds are not from Allah's awliya, because they neither have iman or taqwa. For instance, the unbelieving child, the child of the unbeliever, okay? Those children of the unbelievers, who neither have good deeds or bad deeds, and die in that state, they are not considered from Allah's awliya, because they neither had good deeds or bad deeds. They were neither responsible for their deeds. And likewise, those people who never reached them the message of the prophets. As the Prophet ﷺ explained in the hadith in Muslim Imam Ahmed, that there are groups of people who will come on the day of judgment, they'll have an excuse. Amongst them are that person who never reached them the da'wah of the messengers. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed that. These people are not from Allah's awliya, because they neither had faith, nor did they have good or bad deed. Likewise, those who are, at the same time, you can consider them the mentally insane, for instance, who have no ability to reason. These people are not from Allah's awliya. And so therefore, a popular concept which you find among many human beings, and also Muslims, and if you see, especially like, for instance, like the Indians, the Indians used to think, American Indians used to think that if they had, like, for instance, a person in their tribe who was, like mentally retarded, or he was insane, they used to think of this person was one of Allah's awliya. And so therefore they would give him a special status in the tribe. Because what they figured that because their beliefs that Allah would enter into a human being, so they figured because Allah entered into this human being, he became insane, and therefore he could not, he would act differently than the rest of the people. And so therefore there must be something special. This is something which you find also among some groups of Muslims, like the Sufis.
Name of your, madhab, like, your Hanbali and Shafi'i and Maliki and so forth. So, that argument, is true, but at the same time, they can counter that with it. But my point, which I say to the brother, I don't want to be directly to him, but to anybody, concerning any group of people who follow any sort of ideas or beliefs, all you have to do is ask them, say, okay, produce for us the books you follow. That's all we would like to see. And that's what we did with also with Sheikh Nazim's group. We said to him, okay, send to us your book that you follow. It's just very simple thing, Send to us that which you follow. If you believe in this thing, you must have books, you must have something like that. And let us then see, does this agree with what Allah and His sent His Prophet ﷺ with? If it agrees, alhamdulillah. We might then argue about whether one should use a name or should he just stick with one name. If it doesn't agree, then we know that this is falsehood. And what happens is a lot of times with these groups, they won't send you the book. They'll say, no, you cannot read these books until you reach a certain level of understanding. How is that could be? How could that be the truth? How could that be the truth? And so therefore you have to ask one of their followers to give you the books, or you have to pretend to be a follower and write them a letter and then they send you the books or something like that. For instance, give you an example of the Naqshbandis, okay? In one book called Qut al-Qulub, or Tanwir, it's called Tanwir al-Qulub, by a man called Al-Kurdi. I forgot his first name. Anyway, in this book, Enlightening the Heart, he talks about the miracles of the Naqshbandis. And he talks about the miracle of Shah Naqshband, who is the order, the one in charge of the Silsila, and lived maybe some 600-700 years ago. He said that Shah Naqshband was told by his Sufi Sheikh that in order for him to reach piety, he needs to do khidmah, some sort of service, and his khidmah should be to the animals. And this is okay. Islam tells us to be merciful to the animals. It's not a problem for Islam. So he was so much, doing his khidmah to the animals, that it was to the degree that for many years, that even if a dog would cross the street, this says about his karama, that if a dog would cross the street, he would stop, let the dog pass, and then continue. This is okay. Thus far, nothing in the Sharia that says you can't let a dog cross before you or something like that. And he said until one day, he was doing that, and the dog passed in front of him, and then the dog went on its back and raised its four legs to the sky and started to make dua and told him to say Ameen. So Sheikh Shah Naqshband was overtaken by this karama and started to cry and was saying Ameen. And then he was told to make tawassul, not shirk, but to make tawassul to Allah through the dog. Now, how could this be of the religion of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, the Prophet? Maybe the group of Naqshbandis that in some area might not accept this karama. But this book is used by some people who identify themselves as Naqshbandis, and they prove that their Sufi order, for instance, is better than the Tijanis, is better than the Qadiris, is better than the Rifa'is, is better than the Mawlawis, based upon what? Based upon this karama of the Sheikh. Does your Sheikh have this karama that the dog made tawassul and dua and he said Ameen and so forth? This is an example. For instance, example like for instance in the whirling derwish, those who say they follow Jalaluddin Rumi, for instance, and they sit there and they spin around and they put one finger up to the sky and one finger down to the earth, and they say what happens is Allah enters into them, which causes their bodies not to be able to stand it, so that causes them to spin, and that spinning thing and so forth. How could this be from the religion of Allah Azza wa Jal, that a person spins and dances in that thing, and this is from what the Prophet ﷺ said. This is obviously, a false tasawwuf. Irrespective of what we're going to say now about Jalaluddin Rumi, the point is that those people who call themselves a Mawlawiyya, or Mavli as they pronounce it in Turkish, claim to follow this, and they claim to take these teachings from Jalaluddin Rumi, and they claim that this is the way to draw closer to Allah, and they prefer it over Salah, and so forth. That's why every single masjid has a dancing parlor in it. No.
Going somewhere else, heard the word of Wahhabi, it's something like as you up to you understand?
No.
Okay.
I understand what you're saying.
Because when you went around, then I just particular people, even us, I told people call, they don't possess Wahhabi, but people they don't possess. And then when it comes to saying the people, okay, but I met the people who the other people
No.
we are. But I think there's something like it's interaction, lack of knowledge among the people, or something that I just.
No, but there's a difference. Because I said that initially that with the Sufis, and when other brothers ask their questions, not to take all the time, that that there are two groups. There's a historical tasawwuf which existed, centuries and centuries ago, and those men identified themselves with a tasawwuf, and that, that their madhab, I mean, falls within that of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah in general. Like, for instance, that's written by some of the scholars which are identified with that, like Abdul Qadir Jilani, for instance, or like Al-Junayd, who's called Shaykh al-Ta'ifa, I mean the Shaykh of the Sufis and so forth. And these people in general are considered from scholars from Ahl Sunnah, even though, as any of the people who are the leading, scholars or leaders of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, I mean, they're not always correct in everything they say, they're not always correct in everything they do, but you have to always take their statements and their deeds against that which the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ came with. But now we're talking about a certain phenomena, okay, which is known as, which these modern day tariqas are upon. Just like if, in the same example, like if we were to talk about the Hanbalis, the followers of Ahmad ibn Hanbal, alright? And now we're to take one group of the followers of Ahmad ibn Hanbal, those who are called, I mean, even though they don't call themselves that, but they're called by others as the Wahhabis, right? In order to judge this, we're not judging now all of the madhab of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal and everybody who identified themselves with Ahmad ibn Hanbal. But in order to judge this group of people, I would say that the correct way to judge it is their books. Let us look what Ibn Abdul Wahhab wrote. Let us look what his followers, the scholars among his wrote. Let us look how they practice the religion today and see. That of it which agrees with the Quran and Sunnah, we accept. That which doesn't agree with the Quran and Sunnah, we reject. And likewise with these Sufi orders, like the Naqshbandis, or the Tijanis, or the Rifa'is, and so forth. What I'm trying to say is that anybody who now claims today to be following one of these people, right, we tell them, bring your books. Bring your books, bring your writings, bring what you base your beliefs and your actions upon, and we'll look at it. If it doesn't have the shirk and the so forth, some of the issues I mentioned in, and it agrees with the Quran and Sunnah, alhamdulillah. You might then argue with him concerning the name. But if it does, then it's not part of Islam, no matter how much they want to coat it. And this is my argument. I mean, I say to every time I meet a brother who tells me this, I say, okay, go and ask your people to send you their books. Let's then look at it. It's very simple. Send the books, let them send it by the mail, read the books, and we'll see. And we'll see if it has the shirk in it or not. No. Alright, so not gone.
And it was one of the biggest ships around the world all over the world. I have so many
So I mean, for example, this is, I think if you mean Washington, you mean the Nur-Bakshis, right? Okay, for instance, I mean, this is an example of Washington Nur-Bakshi, because I know them, they live in the same street I used to live in Washington, D.C. So the point is, I mean, for instance, this Sufi order, right? I mean, what I'm trying to say is, if we look at their books and their magazine, they have a magazine and they have the writings and so forth, it becomes very clear. I mean, now you have to listen to the brother's story, that this is something different than the Sharia. So this, again, I say the same thing with any group you come across. Just ask them to bring their books and listen to what their people preach to and judge.
Right now, it's just like I am supporting.
No. Nobody tried to agree that.
But this kind of argument, I start with one people who say against this Wahhabism.
No.
But I heard something, I started with unfavorable sort of people like that. And I have
Personal.
why is it something unfair that you kind of use it? Why don't you just like forward what the brother saying that?
No, but nobody thought that, inshallah ta'ala.
And also, I think that we should give a solution. What kind of people are coming to this? I never get the best example of people I met with good people. And then another you get different background. How can we resolve this? This conference, I think, is very good for this kind of thing. And how can we?
I mean, the resolution, yeah. So the resolution is, I mean, let us say, for instance, let us imagine now that there are 1,000 Sufi orders in the world today. Let's just take a number like that. I mean, if we were to study the majority of the five, and let's say 95% of the people follow 5 of them, and we're to study the beliefs of those 5, we have a good idea of what that general thing is calling, and that's what it is. Just like with the Christians, if you study Catholicism and the Protestant ideas and the Orthodox, I mean, you basically, take about 99% of all the Christians, and you get a pretty good idea. I mean, there might be some church here or there somewhere, which is different, but in general, that is the majority of their ideas. And I think that's the best way to handle it. So. No, this is a long subject, but I mean, in general, the Khilafah in Turkey, I mean, it came to an end because of, 2 factors. Of course, everything is by the decree of Allah. I mean, whatever occurs is by the decree of Allah, but basically because of 2 factors. I mean, internally, Muslims not keeping up with the unbelievers in terms of technologies and so forth. Also, internally, by Muslims becoming impious, Allah punished them due to their impiety and so forth. Their division, their nationalism, not following the Sharia, adhering to wrong concepts like some of these extreme forms of tasawwuf and so forth. And also externally, because of the kuffar, since it was a strong Muslim state, and all the Muslims were basically, for the overwhelming population of the Muslims in the world were in allegiance to this one country, the kuffar fought it. And they fought it for 500 years. And the nations of Europe teamed up for 500 years fighting it until they eventually were able to defeat it. So, to say that, as some people try to say, that the reason why the Uthmanis fell was because that they were Sufis, I think is an injustice to them. That's true. I'm not saying just for the sake of everybody here. Yeah, some people say that. Right.
by the Trans-Jordan at jurisdiction by
So this is a very I mean lengthy subject.
So I'm just curious, is that what,
No, no.
much of us, without harping on that, because I don't do that, but it's pretty much like Adam people understand that
Yeah, I mean, there's one argument. I mean, the let's say the pro Sufi camp, right, argues that the reason why the Uthmanis fell was because the Wahhabis King Abdul Aziz was supported by the British, and this caused the fall of it. And the pro-Saudi camp, I mean, in terms of politically, claimed that, well, these people were a bunch of Sufis, and so, alhamdulillah, they were relegated to the dustbin of history. This is a political argument that has been clothed in religious differences. But that there is, to the argument, there is some truth maybe in different aspects, and it's a very long discussion concerning the events that occurred around the turn of the century in the first few decades, and what to the actual the forces that led to the modern Middle East now. And there's just no way to discuss it all this time. No, I mean without doubt. In one sense, yes. I mean that the poor state of the Muslims, right, allowed and has allowed for these type of ideas to spread in North America. I mean, when the Muslims are strong and upon the Quran and Sunnah, the people who enter the religion come strong and upon the Quran and Sunnah. When the Sahaba were the Muslims, look at the Tabi'een, right? When the Muslims are like the Muslims are today, look at the different types of things that people enter into. They consider to be Islam, has nothing to do with Islam. So this is a direct correlation. But in terms of the original political argument between the Uthmanis and the Saudis, right? That argument no longer exists, in the sense that there is no longer any claimant to the throne of the Uthmanis, and so therefore, I mean, while it might provide some sort of historical benefit, I don't see it of much value to regurgitate the issue over and over those events. I mean, tilka ummatun qad khalat. That's just it's over with, and they're all dead, and so it makes more sense to me to deal with, try to focus on what we have in front of us, than rather events that occurred some 70 years ago.
Earlier when you were speaking about the miracles that some people would have, and just because these miracles do come about doesn't necessarily mean that the person or those group of people may be of the Awliya of Ar-Rahman, but that is the case as an example of the Dajjal. Okay? And even though, it is a miracle because this event has been prophesied by the Prophet. And so this will occur because it's one of the coming signs. But you also say that some miracles that happen to believers and non-believers are either to encourage them, like taking jihad, or to increase their faith. Even one, as we know that one of the miracles or the key that will be the Dajjal will have, and I think it's his last one, is when he takes the man and he cuts him in half and he says, "You see, this is what I've done. I am the Christ, Allah." Where in fact, by him doing this, and he asked this man whom he had cut in half, and he asked this man to make bay'ah to him, in the reverse sense, he says, "No, you are the Dajjal." It increases his faith, and he steps away from the Dajjal. Either two, and I hope it's right. Now, my question is that a few days ago, I had read that the Dajjal will be on the earth for 40 years. And my previous understanding is that he has 40 days, one day would seem like a year. So what I read the other day was probably just a typo thing, right?
Yeah, answering your last question first, your last comment first, you're right. The hadith of the Prophet ﷺ explained to us that at Dajjal, when he'll be on the earth, he'll be for 40 days. The first day will be like a year, the second day will be like a month, the third day will be like a week in terms of its length, and the remaining days will be like the days that we understand, average days. But also, when we refer to those things that I was mentioning, those events that occur upon the hands of the unbelievers and the wicked and the people who deal in sorcery, we shouldn't call it miracles. We should call it supernatural events. Even though the word miracle doesn't really express the Arabic term karama, in its true sense, because karama means, might be translated better as gifts, gifts or something like that. But I mean, it's the term which is popular in English is miracle, and you hear about the miracles of the saints and so forth. So that's why I use that term, because it makes it more familiar for an English audience. But so we call those things that occur to the unbelievers, occurs to the wicked, occurs to the sorcerers, whether and as khawariq, supernatural events, and we describe those which occur to the believers as karamat, or karama being the singular of the word, and usually we describe those which occur to the prophets as mu'jizat, is another term they use, even though Allah just calls them in His Quran as ayat and barahin or burhan, which is the term used by Allah in the Quran, but the term used by scholars is usually mu'jizat. That's just as a comment.
I'll take one more question.
Yeah.
Okay, we have two brothers. We'll take both. Turn brother.
I agree. I mean, in terms of judgment among the Muslims, yes. But we should judge the unbelievers, because sometimes people get confused. I mean, we should make judgment to the Christians and the Jews and the Hindus and the Buddhists, and know that Christians and Jews and Hindus and Buddhists are from the Awliya of Shaitan. At the same time, we have a responsibility, like our brother said, to bring them from that darkness to the light. As the Prophet ﷺ said, that whoever amongst you guides a single man is better for him than the world and all that is in there. We have a responsibility of calling people, and as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, call to the path of your Lord, bil hikmah and wisdom, وَالْمَوْعِظَةِ الْحَسَنَةِ, and a fair preaching, وَجَادِلْهُمْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ, and if you argue with them, argue in that manner which is best. So the best argument means an argument which does not entail insulting, does not entail violence, even though Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded us sometimes to fight, but that has its time, and there's time for preaching, and time for gentleness, and time for harshness, and I think some other lectures will discuss that. But what the brother said in terms of judgmental of the Muslims, and what is appearing now amongst many Muslims, that they like to judge others, and they say, no, he is not, and he is. This is, this is something forbidden, especially when it comes out of ignorance, and out of following desires, which occurs most of the time. When a person is ignorant, and he's following his desires, and so he judges this person as righteous, and this person is not righteous, this person as being upon the truth, and this person not being upon the truth, not based upon any knowledge, but basically only following his ignorance and his desires. This is something forbidden which we should avoid, like the brother said. Alaykum as-salam. Sorry, sir.
you know, you can see no doubt that they are the best Muslims that we can encounter in contrast to someone who was very technical.
Sure. No, I agree. Sorry, son. Just ask Allah to make us from them, inshallah. No, Jazakallah khair. I agree with you. I mean, these are very beautiful words, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us all from that Taif al-Mansura who will give nusra to Allah's religion, inshallah ta'ala. No, I mean I mean, if I left you that impression, I mean, I apologize. The lecture wasn't about tasawwuf or Sufism, so therefore any references I made to the Sufis wasn't, I mean, specific in the sense that it was to generalize concerning all the Sufis. But I mean, since that issue has some tying with the issue of Allah's awliya, let us bring that issue up. When we're dealing with the topic of Sufism, we should distinguish between two matters here. A historical treatment of a tasawwuf, in the sense that we discuss Sufism by all those who have been identified with that throughout the centuries, you know, and this is a very broad discussion. And then a discussion as Sufism which is practiced today, in the sense that the different Sufi orders, as we might say in English, or tariqa in Arabic, those which are existing on earth today, and the leaders of them, and the beliefs present and prevalent amongst them today. Just like when we talk about the issue of Nasara. The Nasara, right? When we make references to Christianity now, right? I mean, we usually say, you know, Christians will be going to hell, Christians are unbelievers, and so forth. But when we talk about the issue of Nasara, those people who claim to follow the Prophet Isa alayhi salam, it's a different discussion, because there were amongst them believers, and there were amongst them who were pious, and amongst them who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has praised in the Quran. So, in many comments that I was making concerning the Sufis, was in reference to Sufism as is practiced today, as a belief which is practiced today, and as the Sufi orders which are practiced today. Sufism as practiced today, and you know, if somebody can show me otherwise, I mean, I'll stand. I mean, I'll retract my words, but I don't think it can be done. As is practiced today, is based upon the concept that there is a way to approach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala outside of the Sharia of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And let us look at, for instance, some of the arguments that they use to forward that. If you look at some of the major books read by the Sufis today, like Tabaqat al-Awliya by Ash-Sha'rani, or a book which is written about Allah's awliya, the different levels and groups of Allah's awliya by Ash-Sha'rani, you find in there things which are not, I mean, acceptable for a person who believes in Allah and the Prophet ﷺ, for a person who wants to adhere to the Quran and Sunnah. Like the argument that there are from Allah's awliya who have the ability to create, and that for 25 years They have not said kun, be, and it is, out of shyness with Allah Azza wa Jal. Or that some of them, for instance, are able to engage in illicit sexual relations with either women or sometimes even with men, or even sometimes with boys. There's even a story in that book with a donkey, and that this is from their karamat, or from their miracles. Or that they did not wash themselves for a number of years, or that they do not pray, and so forth. Okay, these concepts that a person might reach a degree of faith, and he is no longer required to follow the Sharia, is incorrect. But does this now mean that everybody who has been identified throughout the centuries with a tasawwuf, with Sufism, is of these beliefs? No. I don't say that, and I didn't mean to give you that impression. But if we're discussing Sufism today, let's take any tariqah that is practiced by the Sufis today. Okay? Let's take, for instance, what tariqah do you want to take? Let's take the Tijani tariqah. Okay, let us look at the Tijani tariqah, for instance, okay, in West Africa. This is a tariqah which has millions of followers. I mean, it's not just a situation of just 10, 15 people somewhere. Millions upon millions of human beings stretching across the continent from West Africa to East Africa, I mean to the Sudan and so forth. And yet, they believe that they have a dua called Salat al-Fatih, which is better than the Quran. And they say that to read it once is better than reading the Quran, I don't remember now, but how many thousands of times. How could be something that even if we were to accept that Ahmed Tijani, I mean, let's just concede for them the argument that Ahmed Tijani had a dream, and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ taught him this prayer in the dream. Let's just accept it at face value, okay, just for the sake of argument. How could be something that he received in a dream would be better than the Quran so many thousands of times? Okay, also, for instance, what did the Tijani say? It's an example. They said, and it's reported in their books, what's their book called? It's called something. It'll come to me in a second. Al-Jawahir, maybe it's called Al-Jawahir. It says there that whoever was from the Sahaba, one of the companions of Ahmed Tijani, or looked at one of his companions, will go to paradise without any, any judgment upon him or any, punishment whatsoever. How could that be when the companions of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and even those who even saw the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, Abu Lahab, whose uncle, is told in the Quran to be condemned to the hellfire, and his companions do not have, who believed in him and fought with him and so forth, do not have this degree where they'll enter into paradise like that. Likewise, you'll find, for instance, many of people who claim themselves and say that they're Sufis today, they say, look, we do not seek paradise, but what we do is we seek al-ishq, love of Allah Azza wa Jal. And that seeking paradise is for the general folk, and to be fear from this is the worship of the general people, to worship seeking paradise and to be afraid of Allah, but rather they seek love of Allah. Okay, even though Allah describes us for us the prophets in the Quran that they pray to Allah out of raghba and rahba, out of desiring for His reward and desiring His mercy and fearing Him and fearing His punishment. So what I would like to say is that if that Sufism today, whether you look at any of the orders, whether it's the Naqshbandi order or the Tijani order or the Rifa'i order or the Mawlawi order, any of these orders that have millions of followers to it, you cannot find any of them, bring any of their books. Let us sit there and compare the Quran and Sunnah, except that you'll find some of those references I made. But as for Tasawwuf in general, meaning those men who lived centuries ago, before the prevalence of these ideas, of the likes of Abdul Qadir Jilani and Junaid and so forth, who are identified with the Tasawwuf, I mean, there's no doubt that these are from the best of the creation, and that they were pious men, and their lives are examples for us to look into and to follow and so forth. But at the same time, they're like any person. They are not always correct in their statements and their deeds, and they're not always wrong in their statements or deeds.
I have not much knowledge about the war, but say I'm taking the current situation of the religion, and that is conception. I can say that I'm a Muslim person, and I know that the Christians are very well, and the best of the religions are the people who do these ones, make kind of like people, and kind of names. But I have even learned it so far, not certain places, and they are the best of the Muslims I have ever seen in my life, and I have been in the US for years or something. I have been in the here that I have never seen a dedicated religious following this.
Sorry, sir.
As you are generalizing that one, you must go into all evidence and then into order. I know the Turkish constitution and that there is the people and those who are following the national idea or some other. I know the people and we will be like all of them. But as far as the books they are following, that they are
Sorry, sir. No, but I mean,
I have seen myself. That's why generalizing is kind of making.
but brother, I mean, for instance, like this is like the example. I mean, let's say, I mean, I'm going to accept what you say that there are in Turkey now people who identify themselves with the Tariqa Naqshbandiyya, okay, who are, let us say, amongst the most pious and they follow the Sharia and so forth. I'll accept this from you, okay. But this example is like the example of somebody coming to us and saying, look, I know a Christian person, okay, who does not believe in the Trinity and believes that Jesus is only a messenger of Allah, a prophet, and yet at the same time, it's not bani. When they gather, they come in dhikr, loud dhikr and so forth, even though this goes against the Naqshbandi tariqa, because the Naqshbandi tariqa, as you might know, right, one of their qualities is called what? A dhikr al-khafi, silent dhikr, which they're supposed to make dhikr by themselves. And yet they do out loud dhikr, you know, which goes against what a Naqshbandi is. When I asked them, okay, I said, how is it that you call yourselves Naqshbandi, and yet is part of your silsila that you're not supposed to make dhikr out loud, supposed to make dhikr al-khafi. Dhikr al-khafi means dhikr in one's heart. One doesn't even move the tongue, which is against the sunnah, but just to show them that they don't even follow. They said, no, we had a new silsila that came, it abrogated what the old Naqshbandi way did. Likewise, you find in his book Mercy Oceans, you find him saying that everything is Allah. That calling for shirk, saying that those who say that you cannot pray to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ are, enemies of Islam and so forth. That you should be able to pray to the Prophet ﷺ. So what I'm trying to say to you, my brother, that this Naqshbandi order, the silsila, right? Sheikh Nazim is considered now, even though there are other Naqshbandis who will argue who is the one who's in charge of the Naqshbandi silsila, he's considered to be the head of the Sheikh of the Naqshbandis. And even the Sultan of Brunei and even one of the royal family in England has given him bay'ah